One day, when the glory comes, it will be ours, it will be ours. Oh, one day, when the war is won, we will be sure, we'll be sure. Oh, glory. It will be ours, it will be ours. Oh, one day, when the war is won, we will be sure, we'll be sure. Oh, glory, glory. Now the war is not over, victory isn't won, and we'll fight on till it's finished, and when it's all done. Now the war is not over, no, victory isn't won, and we'll cry glory.
Thank you all so much. That was amazing. Coron, thank you for attending. Thank you for agreeing to come and show your talents today. I was really happy that you were able to be here. And now we're going to get started. This has been a long time coming to repair the stones of Mary and Thaddeus Newton and install a new stone for their son, Stephen Newton, who passed away at the assault on Fort Wagner during the Civil War. And so this ceremony is meant to honor those folks and their family and their bravery, as well as honor the family that is here as well, and the sacrifices of their ancestors. Now I'm going to have a gentleman come up and speak who is the Reverend at Bethel AME Church here in New Haven, a church that Thaddeus Newton was a trustee of, helped them purchase their first plot of land for their first building. So, if you will, Reverend Stephen Cousins.
I know it says invocation, but I just want to talk for a second. We don't tell everyone's stories. We only want to tell the stories that seem important or matter to us. But it lets us know that every story, whether it be shared or unshared, is important, and how all of our stories intersect and connect. I served the pastor as Bethel for 11 years. Not once did I ever hear the name of Thaddeus Newton. Never came up. It wasn't until Mr. John came to my office and actually showed me documentation saying that he was a trustee. I didn't believe him till he showed me the documentation. And I said, oh, well, here it is. And how he made the final down payment for the land that we originally sat on. On top of that, my wife is a historian. And so as they gave me all this information, my wife looked him up. And the story ran so deep. Well, I know it'll be shared, but just for this part, when the 54th Massachusetts Regiment was being formed, they actually came to Bethel, New Haven to hold a meeting to recruit. It was at that meeting where Stephen enlisted. I say that because Thaddeus understood, even he was failing in health, he still instilled in his children the value of freedom. And it's because he understood it when he came to the church, put everything he had to serve on the board to make sure that his children had an opportunity that he may not have received in his earlier years. And it's that land that we sit on today, it's that spirit that we're all here today, where his story is important. And his story is our story. And I am so proud to be connected to that lineage. So as we gather here today to commemorate the Newton life with Stephen, Alexander, Mary, and Thaddeus, let us never forget the principles that they fought for, which is life, liberty, and a pursuit of happiness. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Pastor Cousin. I appreciate you. Thank you for that. I'm going to give a rundown of Mary and Thaddeus Newton and their story so that you kind of have the depth of who it is we're talking about here today. Mary Margaret Heritage Newton, a free woman of color, and her husband Thaddeus Newton, who was enslaved in New Bern, North Carolina, exemplify the efforts of African Americans enslaved and free to sustain loving marriages and build strong family units. Thaddeus was enslaved in the household of Peter and Catherine Custis, distant cousins to Confederate General Robert E. Lee's wife, Mary Ann Custis. Like many in New Bern's black population, Thaddeus was an artisan with marketable skills. He was a shoemaker. Mary and Thaddeus married on February 14th, 1837. They would have 6 children, most notably Alexander Heritage Newton, born November 5th, 1837, and Stephen Newton, born in 1845. The Newtons lived in the racially mixed Dryboro neighborhood of New Bern, North Carolina. Mary lived in her own home with her children, but had to travel to the Custis home to visit her husband. This arrangement was difficult for the Newton family. Their son Alexander Newton recalls an incident that occurred while joining his mother on a visit to see his father Thaddeus at his enslaver's home. Park Custis, a male child of the enslaver, helped himself to a piece of pie on the table without asking. As she would have done with her own children, Mary Newton began to grab him with intent to scold him. But fearing retribution, Thaddeus Newton grabbed Mary, allowing the child to run away with the pie. New Bern was a dangerous and a difficult place for black people, whether enslaved or not. Their son Alexander, although he was free, recalled that he was stripped down and whipped with 39 lashes by his employer because he decided not to perform a task. He says his back was lacerated, taking 3 weeks to heal. The city of New Bern subsequently passed an ordinance making it legal to whip Negroes, whether free or enslaved. At some point, Thaddeus was diagnosed with consumption, tuberculosis. Doctors told Thaddeus that there was no medicine that could cure him and that he would die. Soon after, Mary fled New Bern, headed for New York, where she engaged with a network of black leaders, including Robert Hamilton, Henry Highland Garnett, and Henry Ward Beecher. They would help her raise the money to purchase her husband Thaddeus out of slavery. Along with freeing her husband, Mary also helped in freeing the Caraway family, also from New Bern. Once securing her husband's freedom, Mary and Thaddeus moved to New Haven, Connecticut. On arriving in New Haven, Thaddeus was unable to perform in his trade as a shoemaker due to his illness. To help support his family, Thaddeus became a peddler, selling fruits from a cart during the summer, assisted by Mary and their sons. Thaddeus would also become a trustee in the First AME Bethel Church of New Haven, working to secure the property for their building on Sperry Street, a building that still stands today. Mary Newton also worked. She pushed a wash cart, used to offer clothes washing services on the street. She washed clothing for soldiers at Grapevine Point, now known as Crisqualo Park. Doing this, the family was able to save up $100, which they used to get a $300 mortgage on a home at 18 Winter Street here in New Haven in 1863. During this time, Mary also used homeopathic methods in an attempt to treat her husband's illness, giving him herbal drinks as medicine. Becoming proficient at homeopathic medicine, she was listed as a physician in the New Haven City Directory. She also became part of the New Haven Homeopathic Society, referred to as Dr. Newton. Hearing that the government was allowing black men to fight, Mary and Thaddeus' son, Stephen, enlisted in the 54th Massachusetts Colored Infantry Regiment on April 18, 1863. The 54th would later be memorialized in the 1989 film Glory. On July 18, 1863, Stephen would die in the assault on Fort Wagner, the same battle depicted at the end of the movie Glory. His body would be buried in a mass grave at the site of the battle, his remains never appropriately identified, therefore never returning here to Connecticut. Shortly after his brother's death, Alexander Newton enlisted in the 29th Connecticut Colored Volunteer Regiment. He brought along with him his 15-year-old brother, William, who served as a servant to Captain Griswold in the 29th. Of note, the 29th Connecticut Colored Regiment was the first regiment to enter the burning Confederate capital of Richmond, Virginia. Alexander Newton would speak of seeing Abraham Lincoln as he came to tour the burning city the next day. Serving honorably, Alexander was discharged in November of 1865. Although Mary tried her best to save her husband using homeopathic methods, Thaddeus Newton passed away from his long illness on March 15, 1868. The blessing being that Mary was able to provide him 8 years of freedom. Mary would live out the rest of her life in the same New Haven home they bought in 1863, a home that would become a symbol of comfort and stability for the entire Newton family for many years. In honor of Thaddeus Newton, their grandson, James C. Newton, would marry his wife Harriet in that very home on March 15, 1899, exactly 31 years to the day after the death of his grandfather. Their grandson, James, had a daughter named Ethel that same year. This must have been an exciting time for Mary Newton on becoming a great-grandmother. Her grandson's new wife and her great-granddaughter are both listed as living in her home in the 1900 census. James and his wife would have another daughter in 1902, giving Mary another great-granddaughter. In 1903, while helping care for her great-grandkids at her grandson James' home in Derby, Mary Newton inadvertently knocked over a kettle of boiling water and was severely burned. The stress of this incident caused her health to decline. Aware of the imminency of her death, Mary proceeded to plan her own funeral. She set aside a sum of money for the services, selected the style of her casket, selected the area of this plot where she wanted to be buried, and even made her own shroud. Soon after completing all those preparations, Mary Newton died on February 18th, 1904. Her son Alexander would write his autobiography in 1910, honoring his beloved mother, Mary, within the pages. I'm going to read you like a small bit of what he said about his mother in his book. He says, "I shall never forget her looks when dying. With her eyes fixed on me, she said, 'Do the work of the ministry as becomes a minister of the Lord Jesus. See to it that no disgrace is brought on the cause which you represent by your unworthiness.' To my brother Henry, she said, 'My work is done. Neither of you can do me any good. Be earnest and true to your trust, and meet me in the morning where parting is no more.'" She then sang a hymn with them. And at the end of that hymn, he says, "Then she left us. And from that day until the day when I promised to meet her, I will be lonely without her." The story of Mary and Thaddeus Newton is a love story, one that began with their marriage on Valentine's Day in 1837, a love strong enough that Mary found a way to free her husband. Theirs was a love story of family and of country. 3 of their sons serving during the Civil War in the fight for freedom, one dying for it. Theirs was a love to be honored and remembered. And it's meaningful to me that everyone came out today to actually honor them. So I'm going to, at this point, welcome up Mayor Justin Elliker to give his words.
Good morning, everybody. It's a wonderful day to wear a suit. But I'm not wearing a hat and gloves, so hats off to you all for being champions in this heat. I thank you, John, for organizing this event and for sharing the story of Thaddeus and Mary, Stephen, Alexander, and William. And I really liked what Pastor Cousins said about not knowing their story until today. And I'm sure some of you did, but I imagine many of us didn't. I certainly didn't. And it's clearly important to us as a community by the people gathered here today, you all, and we also have Senator Blumenthal that's going to share some remarks after I am. We have Charles Warner, who is deeply wise in the history of the city of New Haven. We have the city historian, Michael Morand here, Todd Levine, who's the State Preservation Office. I think, I'm not sure that's the exact technical title, but a lot of people that are steeped in the history of Connecticut. And the reason it's important is not just because of their individual stories, but because of the symbolism behind their stories, right? Because there are so many other people that we don't know about that that walked a similar pathway. And I think that there's a few things that I would like to point out of just how important this is to the city. You know, first is sharing the history of our residents, and the fact that there are so many untold heroes in our community. Second is the history of New Haven being a place that is a beacon of hope, is a welcoming place. And while I think it's important for us not to be naive about it, I am sure there are people in New Haven that did not welcome Thaddeus and Mary. But overwhelmingly, our history as a city is one that welcomes people that are struggling and continues to do so today. And what pride I hope you share with me that they chose to come to New Haven to live a freer life and to pursue happiness with their family and children. And the third thing is honoring someone for giving their life to represent their values. The fact that Stephen volunteered himself to fight in the war because I think we can all be assured he believed it was the right thing to do, even though he lost his life in that struggle, is something that I think that can serve as an inspiration for many of us to to do everything that we can to serve our community. I see some veterans here. Thank you so much for your service to our country. In a moment in time where I think public service is more difficult than ever, and there are not as many people stepping up, I think we should take this moment to reflect on the Stephens out there that have served our country and served our community, and strive to do everything that we can to walk in their footsteps. I'm honored today to present a proclamation to Angela Levy. Angela, you're here. So you are the great-great-great-granddaughter of Mary and Thaddeus. That is amazing. And you've traveled from Florida to be here? Amen. Amen. Do you mind coming up really quickly? Thank you. And this heat's nothing to you, huh?
Well, I'm from Buffalo, grew up in Buffalo.
Oh, okay. So you still don't like it. So I have a proclamation to present to you on behalf of the City of New Haven. Whereas the City of New Haven honors Mary and Thaddeus Newton, a married couple who lived in the 1800s and are one of New Haven's and the United States' many untold stories of Black history. Whereas Thaddeus Newton was a North Carolina enslaved man who was freed through the Underground Railroad by his wife Mary Newton, born Mary Heritage, a free Black woman. Whereas Mary and Thaddeus Newton settled in New Haven in 1860, where Thaddeus became a trustee in Bethel AME Church, and both Mary and Thaddeus worked as pushcart peddlers. Whereas Mary and Thaddeus bought a house on Winter Street in 1863, just around the corner from the church, and had 3 sons, Stephen, Alexander, and William, who served in the Civil War. Whereas Stephen died while fighting with the 54th Massachusetts Colored Regiment at the assault on Fort Wagner in South Carolina, his body was never recovered. Whereas Mary and Thaddeus are buried together at Evergreen Cemetery in New Haven, and today a memorial gravestone for their son Stephen will be unveiled alongside his parents' renovated stone to honor his life and service. Whereas Mr. John Mills, of a Connecticut-based genealogist, has worked for years on a shining new light on the stories and histories of Black soldiers and enslaved people through independent research and work within his nonprofit, the Alex Brienne Corporation. Today we are honoring the lives of Mary and Thaddeus Newton through a celebration of life. Now, therefore, do I, as mayor of the City of New Haven, hereby honor Mary and Thaddeus Newton. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. And now I'd like to welcome up, and honored to have today Senator Richard Blumenthal.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for being here, and thanks to all who were involved in organizing this very meaningful and important event. And welcome to Angela. I know you came here to escape the heat, right? I'm sure it's hotter at home. But I'm not wearing a suit, I'll tell you. I make a lot of sacrifices. But I'm really delighted to be here on this beautiful day in this truly exquisite place and celebrate a freedom fighter. Stephen Newton was a freedom fighter. All of you who have seen Glory or know the story of Fort Wagner remember that Black freedom fighters at that time in our history were regarded as kind of secondary, not as courageous, not as able. They were consigned to their own units, and in fact, segregation in our armed services continued until literally the 1950s. And Fort Wagner, in a sense, was a turning point because those Black soldiers proved themselves on that beach. Anybody who's seen the movie Glory, as the Reverend mentioned, knows how well they acquitted themselves under fire, how bravely they served and sacrificed. I was thinking about that story because just about 10 days ago I was in France at Normandy for the 80th anniversary of D-Day. One of the most moving events of my lifetime. The speeches by Biden and Macron were eloquent, but what was, in a way, most meaningful to me was to see the veterans. You know, they're all about 100 years old now. That's the average age. The youngest is 97 or 98. And the President of France, Macron, awarded about 15 of the veterans the French Legion of Honor. And among them were 2 black veterans. A reminder about the bravery of that moment, like the bravery of the moment at Fort Wagner, and the importance of often a small group of individuals. Those soldiers who stormed the beaches, Omaha Beach, gave their lives. Literally, the first wave, 90% killed. The second wave, 80% killed. They jumped off the landing boats into 8 feet of water under hail of mortar fire and machine gun bullets. And they faced this beach 3 football fields long. 3 football fields long, like the beach at Fort Wagner, completely flat. No cover, no place to hide. And standing there on the beach, I looked up and saw the places where the Germans fired at them. Literally, from a height 6 or 7 stories high, they had total advantage, and somehow those soldiers on D-Day overcame the Germans. They liberated Europe. They preserved our democracy. That tradition of service is, in a sense, what we honor today, that bravery by Americans. The Newton story is an American story. It is an American story. Now, as you heard, it's also a love story. Thaddeus and Mary married on Valentine's Day, 1837. And they were married with 6 children until he died in 1868. Too short a life, too short a time of freedom. But his sons, not just Stephen, but also Alexander and William, served to preserve freedom. So this story is an American story about freedom fighters, and it continues today. The men and women in uniform here have raised their right hand with allegiance not to a government, not to a president, to the Constitution of the United States, which now has an amendment that prohibits slavery. We fight for freedom to preserve the rule of law that protects all of our liberty. And I want to thank every one of you for enabling us to honor that great tradition and value today. We all share gratitude to the Newton family, Thaddeus, Mary, all of their sons, all of their descendants, who remind us what is important about Juneteenth, celebration of emancipation, which is not just about the joy, it's also about the service. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Senator Blumenthal. That was awesome. As we talked, Alexander Newton was their son, Mary and Thaddeus Newton's son, Alexander Newton, was a member of the 29th Connecticut Colored Regiment. And he writes about his experiences in that regiment. He writes about racism while out and fighting. He writes about coming back to Connecticut in October of 1865, and the state of Connecticut had just voted down giving African American men the right to vote. And as they're returning, they write about being not too happy with coming back to Connecticut. They wrote about coming to Hartford and walking right up to Connecticut's old State House and listening to Governor Buckingham talk to them, apologizing for the state not giving them their right to vote. So I see the 29th as a regiment that the state should likely be honoring in a large way for their sacrifices and what they endured while out and about because they were black. I have an individual here, Kelly Merrow, who runs the Connecticut 29th Colored Regiment Descendants Group, and I wanted to give her time to add some words.
Good morning. Thank you, John, for including me in this very special service, and special greetings to Senator Blumenthal and Mayor Elliker. My name is Kelly Merrow, and I'm a descendant of 4 Native and Black soldiers who fought in the Civil War. They were all members of the CT-29 Colored Regiment. I am humbled to be here this morning to honor the contributions to freedom that were made by Thaddeus and Mary Newton and their sons, one of whose image is actually on some of our material, including on our monument located in Criscolo Park. I am also honored to spend time memorializing the Newton family, who were dedicated to eliminating the system of slavery in America. They had the fortitude to fight for freedom years before the Civil War even started. Mary's work in abolition and her focus on freedom, not just for her husband, but for all slaves, surpasses amazing because of the time period in our country's history when the systemic structure of slavery and the societal norms of former slaves and freed blacks was perilous. The Newton's family story is incredible. Their freedom story is their family's legacy. I'm happy for New Haven that Thaddeus and Mary settled here. Mary helped the CT-29 while they trained here in New Haven. 2 of her sons would later join the CT-29 in different capacities, both to fight for freedom. The Newton family's contribution to abolitionism and the work of the CT-29, who would eventually impact the outcome of the Civil War. I'm inspired by Thaddeus and Mary's bravery and selflessness. The Newton family's connection to the CT-29 inspires our work today. After learning of the Newton family's story, their legacy, if you will, we are now motivated to continue their work towards modern freedom for people of color. Modern freedom contains the same factors that freedom had in 1865, right? The aspects of social health, which includes education, employment, financial literacy, health, and opportunity. The Civil War ended 159 years ago, but the conditions of freedom are not yet met. They are inherent to many, yet are still ignored to citizens of color. Declared for the country, but sometimes denied to Black people. The conditions of education, employment, financial opportunity, health care, and clean neighborhoods in the Black community have remained poor for the past 159 years, despite the Emancipation Proclamation's guarantee of freedom. The CT29 is committed to sustaining the legacy of the Newton family by working on those elements of modern freedom for communities of color. The Newton family started something here in New Haven. As we remember them, commemorate their contributions, and honor their death, let us also reflect on how we can let their legacy live by continuing what they started and work for freedom and justice for all.
Thank you so much, Kelly, and thank you for coming. I'd like to offer some space for our New Haven city historian, Michael Moran, to offer some words as well. I'm honored to have him here.
Thank you, Mr. Mills, Senator Blumenthal, Mayor Elliker, Pastor Cousin, Newton family, all protocols observed. Congratulations to all involved in this. We have a debt to Mr. Mills and all who've worked to make this day happen. I think we gathered here all know history is not a foreign country. It is a place where we are and a place where we live. And I emphasize the live part even as we gather, as it were, in a city of the dead, because we know we come here to honor those who came before in the service of engaging the past for the present and most importantly for the future. As Frederick Douglass, someone who the Newtons surely knew and probably saw when he spoke in New Haven, as Frederick Douglass said on July 5th, 1852, we have to do with the past only as we can make it useful to the present and to the future. To all inspiring motives, to noble deeds which can be gained from the past, we are welcome. But now is the time, the important time. And that is what this day summons us to, as Ms. Miro so powerfully just said. We engaged yesterday because of today for tomorrow. And I just want to conclude these brief remarks by noting this joins a great constellation of community memory. And I look out and see so many who have been doing this important work. No disrespect to other towns in Connecticut or other towns in America, but I really believe there is no town that has been doing the work of community memory work and memorialization more and more fully, and that makes us poised to do even more in the future. I think about the stone with Curtis Patton had installed for Cortlandt Van Rensselaer Creed in 2007 in Grove Street, the stone that he and others had for Edward Boucher, which I encourage you to pass just up the way. The stone in 2016, which you can spy down here, of Helen Hagan. Edward Boucher of Bradley Street and Helen Hagan of Whaley join with these great family of Winter Street. And of course, we think of the extraordinary work of the descendants in the monument at Criscolo Park in 2008. And it actually goes way back even here to the Knight Hospital Memorial, which if you don't know, I hope you get to know in this place, dedicated in 1870, that is the final resting place of many heroes of the Civil War, including many members of the Connecticut 29th, a place like the Westville Cemetery that has a Freedom Trail marker, and a place that represents the generations and constellations of work. So today, a bright star joins this constellation, and we understand that constellations give more persistent and brighter light than individual stars. And so too, we gather, as it were, on June 21st, which is a Juneteenth. Juneteenth officially is the 19th, but we in New Haven, inspired by so many here, must live as if Juneteenth is every day. And since it's a leap year, we get 366 Juneteenths this year. And it's good to remember, and I think about this from where I stand and who I am, the title, Juneteenth National Independence Day, the full title. It is a National Independence Day, and let us remember that as we get ready for the other National Independence Day. There is no independence for all, as Ms. Miro noted, unless there is no independence for any unless there's independence for all. And we need to remember the nation was saved because black people fought in the Civil War. We need to recognize that the nation was saved and redeemed by those such as those we recognize here. Let me close with a quote from Langston Hughes, who you may know lives in New Haven because his papers are downtown, and about Frederick Douglass. He wrote a great poem, Langston Hughes, that ended, Frederick Douglass died in 1895. He is not dead. Thaddeus Newton died in 1868, Mary Newton in 1904, Stephen Newton in 1863. What Mr. Mills and all remind us today, they are not dead.
Thank you so much, Michael. I appreciate that. Now I'd like to welcome and give some space to speak Mr. Todd Levine of the Connecticut State Historic Preservation Office and the Connecticut Freedom Trail, as well as Mr. Charles Warner of the Amistad Committee and the Connecticut Freedom Trail.
Hello, folks. How are you today? All right. My name is Todd Levine. I'm an architectural historian for the State Historic Preservation Office and the coordinator for the Connecticut Freedom Trail. I'm joined by the chairman of the Connecticut Freedom Trail, Charles Warner, and together on behalf of the State Historic Preservation Office, DECD, and the Connecticut Freedom Trail Site Selection Committee, we'd like to welcome you guys to this event and celebrating the unveiling of our newest site to the Connecticut Freedom Trail, the Mary and Thaddeus Newton Memorial here at Evergreen Cemetery.
Good afternoon. My name is Charles Warner, as was said before. First, I'd like to say thank you to John, who is quite the dynamo when it comes to genealogy, and he has a very, very a strong passion for history, but more importantly, local history. And it is because of his work that we are here today. John recently, within the last year, joined the Connecticut Freedom Trail, and so it is my honor, our honor, to be here to induct this revivified space to the Connecticut Freedom Trail. I'd also like, just to give you a little information, the Connecticut Freedom Trail was founded in 1995 as an act of the Connecticut legislature. We formally call the late, great Al Martyr and the historic figure, former mayor of New Haven, Tony Harp, our leading founders of the Connecticut Freedom Trail. It was then Senator Harp who took the idea for the trail to the floor of the Connecticut legislature. But there are also people in the audience today. Roz Hamilton, who was there, we count as one of our founders of the Freedom Trail. Certainly my cousin over there, Kelly Marrow, who represents descendants of the 29th. We are proud to be here together to support John, the city, and the family, making sure that residents all over the state and visitors all over the country know that they can come to Evergreen and join in a nice long line of Black history, national history, and so it is my honor to be here. To Ms. Levy, to the family, it is a pleasure being in your presence. To Mayor Elliker and to Senator Blumenthal, thank you for being supportive of history, Black history, diverse history at a time when all of this is on the table for being eradicated. So thank you for your service in fighting for truth, justice, and the story of America. And so, again, it's my pleasure to be with you today. And John, thank you so much.
So I think what we're going to do is we're going to take this opportunity now to invite Mark up, right, for the unveiling. And then, Angela, if you can come up too, we have something as well, right? Or is there a change?
No, I'm going to give Mark some space to say some words, and then, yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, then why don't we do that then?
Well, I thank you all for being here today. I'm sure I will not be as eloquent speaker as the previous speakers. But first I would like to thank John Mills for his extraordinary work in entrusting us at Monument Preservation and Restoration with the preservation of this monument and the installation of the Stephen Newton stone. We were truly honored to be given the opportunity. In a few minutes, we will be unveiling the preserved monument of Thaddeus and Mary Newton. But it is not just a monument, it is a testament of their love for one another and their incredible story of unwavering perseverance, fortitude, endurance, and patriotism. It is a tribute to the family Mary so lovingly nursed, cared, and provided for. And today, as it stands again in honor of Thaddeus and Mary Newton, I hope it also stands as a beacon for their descendants and that their incredible story be an inspiration to us all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mark, and thank you for agreeing to restore the monument. All right, now I'm going to ask you all to do a little exercise for me to ensure that you all were cool and not too hot, not sitting in the sun. You're actually facing the back of the monument. So I'm gonna need you all now, as we unveil it, to walk towards this side. I hope you appreciate that we had you in the shade for a little while.
I guess I'll just stay. I didn't catch the shade right here. I was right in the sun.
Yeah, right in the sun. We'll just pull the bow off first.
What's going on? How are you? This is your family? Oh, good to know. I wish I known it before. He was just right on the way the whole time. All right.
All right. Bow. And then we'll do the cloth. And then the cloth. Mark Omara did a lot, and he spent a lot of time here working on the repair of Thaddeus and Mary Newton stone. It had been buried in the ground for many decades. It was sinking into the earth, and the work he did to restore it to a point where we can actually read it, it's legible, and it stands again, is amazing. And I'd also like to thank Del Fiore of the Evergreen Cemetery for allowing us to work with U.S. Office of Veterans Affairs to get a memorial stone for Stephen Newton installed next to his parents. And we were just under the wire, and we just got the Freedom Trail marker installed in that granite stone so that we can then place that there for this occasion. So thank you to everyone who was involved in that.
Thanks, John and Angela. We'd also, the State Historic Preservation Office in DCD, the state of Connecticut, would like to also present to you your own little personal plaque that you can take home of the Connecticut Freedom Trail.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. This is beautiful. I appreciate all. It's heavy. Beautiful.
And with that, we will then offer space for military honors, the Connecticut National Guard, and the Mass 54th to celebrate these folks. You can move back to your seats now. Get out of that sun.
So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Command Sergeant Major Paul Vicenius, and I'm here humbled and honored to represent the military that are with us today as part of our honors rendering. More specifically, I'm here to represent the Connecticut Army National Guard, which is the oldest of our military organizations here in the country, older than the United States itself. And specifically, I'm here to represent as well the 102nd Infantry, which traces its roots back to the 1630s, when the 2nd Regiment of Connecticut, stationed here in New Haven, was called up by then the British Emperor to stand guard. The 102nd Infantry has fought in every major battle, to include the Civil War, but also going back to Revolutionary times and before that, as well as most recently serving in Afghanistan and in the Horn of Africa. And I'm truly honored to be here to honor the descendants of the Newton family, to honor Mary and Thaddeus, and most specifically to honor Private Stephen Newton, who is a son of the city of New Haven, who is a brother in arms, who is a patriot and a fellow American. And I want to tell you a little bit about the military honors that we will provide. You see, the military honors themselves are rich and steeped in tradition, history. We will bear witness to a 3-round volley. I want you to be prepared for that. That will be loud. We will hear the playing of taps and witness the flag folding. There are 13 flags in the flag folding, and each of the folds is symbolic of its own individual piece. But I want to speak specifically about the 6th fold of the flag, which is symbolic of our Pledge of Allegiance, because I think that it is specific and special to Stephen. As was stated eloquently by one of our previous speakers, when we pledge allegiance, we do so to the flag. We do not do so to any specific leader, to any specific form of government. The flag is a symbol of the nation. It is not necessarily who we are, but who we can be. And I think that is meaningful relative to the freedoms that Stephen fought for what this country could be versus what it was during the time of his enlistment with the 54th. We pledge allegiance also to the republic for which it stands. That's the people, that's you and I, that's the generations that have come before us and sacrificed, and most importantly, it's the generations in front of us, those not even yet born, those too young to know the responsibilities that they will someday need to take up. We pledge allegiance to one nation under God, a country that was founded on religious freedoms, on freedoms of the individual, freedoms that we have not always worn and that we will still continue to fight for. Indivisible, which is what we must be, united in our efforts to that pursuit of continuous freedom. And closes with the most important words, I believe, with liberty and justice for all, for everyone, for all of us, regardless of the color of our skin, our ideology, how we identify. It is an honor to pay tribute to the Newton family and to Private Stephen Newton personally. I want to tell you about the 3-round volley and then close my comments with short comments about Stephen. The 3-round volley dates back to the era of the Romans, when at the end of the day of battle, the field was cleared of those killed in action. The soldier removing his slain comrade would call out his name 3 times into the night as a form of remembering their sacrifice. A formation of 3 military members will soon fire 3 volleys of blank rounds over the grave of our fallen service member. This tradition performed today is a way to signal that the deceased has been cared for. After the volleys have been fired, the spent shell casings will be presented to a family representative. The 3 bullet casings represent the 3 volleys fired and the 3 words, duty, honor, and country. After those 3 volleys are fired, taps will be played. It is customary to stand and salute if in uniform, or to place your hand over your heart if not in uniform. This is a moment to reflect and honor the soldier who gave his life while serving his country. Private Newton Stephen, 18, single, a waiter, born in New Haven, Connecticut on 18 April 1863. Private Newton Stephen, killed 18 July 1863 at Fort Wagner. Private Newton Stephen.
behalf of the President of the United States, the United States Army, and the grateful nation, please accept this flag as a symbol of our appreciation for your loved one's honorable and faithful service.
All right, thank you all for coming. I'm gonna, for the last word, I'm going to have Dale Fiore of Evergreen Cemetery come up and close out with remarks.
Well, thank you, John. This has been an extraordinary morning at Evergreen. Good afternoon. My name is Dale Fiore. I'm the general manager here at Evergreen. Evergreen has been my home since 1986. So I think I know a little bit about the death care industry, but I know very little, and I'm always learning more about the history of the individuals at Evergreen. Good morning to distinguished guests, families, friends. Since 1848, the Evergreen Cemetery Association has been serving families throughout the greater New Haven community by providing burial space for their loved ones. On behalf of our board of directors, my entire staff, we welcome you to Evergreen. At Evergreen, we feel that our cemetery is for the living to enjoy its beauty, its quiet, its solitude, but most of all, a place to remember a loved one that has passed and all of its history. Today, we continue to offer necessary services to our families with burial space, cremation, and memorialization, as we see today. A special thank you to my new friend, John Mills, whom I've worked closely with during the restoration of the original monument and securing a permanent veteran marker for Stephen. I thank you. Please join us at the office for some light refreshment, some liquid refreshment, and some cooling. And thank you all for coming to Evergreen.